She believed she was escaping a cage, but the bars were never around her. They were inside her. She told herself she wanted peace, but what she wanted was attention. She wanted passion, but what she found was exhaustion. Every post, every smile, every new beginning was just another scene in a play she didn't know she was starring in. The truth is, she didn't break free. She just changed prisons. And when the lights go out and the applause fades, she's left with one haunting question. What if the problem was never him? Everyone talks about what happens to men after divorce. The heartbreak, the silence, the rebuilding. But almost no one talks about what happens to women. Not the filtered version, not the story she tells her friends, but the truth. Because while she's out there chasing freedom, something else is quietly breaking inside her. A psychological pattern so predictable, it's almost mathematical. If you've ever looked at your ex's smile online and thought she was thriving while you were sinking, stay. Because what happens next will change the way you see everything about love, loss, and freedom itself. This is the truth about what happens to women after divorce. She calls it freedom, a clean slate, a second chance to rediscover herself after years of feeling invisible. In the first few weeks, her world feels intoxicating. She buys new furniture, moves things around, paints the walls white because it feels like a reset. She joins yoga classes, takes photos of sunsets, uploads them with captions about strength and self-love. Every gesture is a declaration. I'm finally free. There's laughter over wine with her friends, toasts to new beginnings, playlists filled with songs about empowerment. Her phone lights up with messages from people telling her how brave she is. For a moment, it almost feels true. She tells herself she's never been happier, never been lighter. But beneath the celebration, there's a silence she can't name yet. Because this feeling, this high, isn't peace. It's adrenaline. It's what happens when someone breaks away from gravity but hasn't realized they're still falling. She mistakes motion for progress, distraction for healing. Every plan she makes is loud enough to drown out the quiet questions, the ones that whisper when she's alone. Who am I now? Who will catch me if I slip? She scrolls through photos of beaches, quotes about rebirth, and women smiling into the sun. They all look free. None of them look real. Freedom, she tells herself, means no one to answer to, no one to disappoint. But freedom also means no one waiting for her at the end of the day. No voice calling her name from another room. No heartbeat beside her in the dark. What she's celebrating isn't freedom. It's escape. Temporary, weightless, unsustainable. The truth is, she hasn't landed yet. She's floating between who she was and who she thinks she'll become. But no one stays airborne forever. And when the fall begins, it's always faster than she expects. She doesn't notice when the validation starts to replace the silence. At first it's harmless, compliments from friends, heart emojis under her photos, co-workers telling her she looks so much happier now. The praise hits like a rush. Every "you look amazing" becomes proof that leaving was the right choice. She buys a new dress, posts another picture, and watches the likes stack up like digital confetti. There's a thrill in it. Short, bright, addictive. For the first time in years, she feels seen. But what she doesn't realize is that she isn't being seen. She's being mirrored. Every compliment reflects the story she's trying to sell. The story of a woman reborn. And as long as people believe it, she has to believe it too. She becomes fluent in the language of performance, light laughter, confident captions, careful filters that hide the fatigue under her eyes. It's not deceit, it's survival. Because in this stage, validation isn't about attention, it's about anesthesia. It numbs the fear that maybe she traded stability for applause. Her friends feed the narrative like it's oxygen. You're glowing. You're thriving. You deserve more. Each phrase lands like another drink at a party that never ends. She feels untouchable, powerful, as if every man who looks at her is proof that she made the right call. She rediscovers flirtation, the lightness of being desired. The novelty electrifies her. Dating apps open a portal of endless options, matches, messages, late-night conversations that feel like possibility. She interprets quantity as quality, attention as intention, and novelty as value. But deep down, the hunger grows. Validation is a drug that demands escalation. What once satisfied her now feels small. She needs more likes, more eyes, more proof. And when the feed goes quiet, when the notifications slow, the silence returns. Only this time it feels heavier, because now she knows what it's like to drown it out, and how empty it is when the noise fades. Every high has a hangover, and hers is coming. It starts with something small. A first date that looks perfect on paper. He's well-dressed, articulate, funny enough to keep her smiling. They share dinner, maybe a drink after. It feels normal, even promising. But at the end of the night when he leans in, his hands unfamiliar, his scent foreign, something shifts. It isn't passion. It's absence. He doesn't know that she hates thunderstorms. He doesn't know that she checks the locks 3 times before bed. He doesn't know her laugh, not the real one that used to escape mid-conversation when she felt safe. He knows nothing. And the emptiness of that realization hits harder than any breakup ever did. For the first time, she senses what she lost wasn't just a husband. It was context. A world that made sense, even when it was imperfect. But she won't admit that. Not yet. She'll tell herself this is normal, that this is what dating is supposed to be. Excitement, discovery, adventure. She'll schedule another date, swipe through more profiles, answer more shallow questions. Each new face blends into the next. Each good morning text feels recycled. The laughter starts to sound rehearsed. The compliments start to echo. And slowly, without realizing, her mind begins to compare. Not consciously. She'd never admit that. But deep in her wiring, the pattern matching begins. The charming one interrupts her mid-sentence. The confident one avoids eye contact when things get serious. The fun one drinks too much. Piece by piece, the illusion fractures. She begins to understand that attention isn't intimacy, and chemistry isn't connection. She still repeats the mantra, "He was the problem," because it's easier than facing the silence underneath it. But her subconscious whispers something she can't ignore anymore. At least, he was real. She drives home after another date, headlights slicing through the night. Her apartment feels colder than before, and as she drops her purse on the table, a thought crosses her mind. Quiet, unwanted, undeniable. Freedom feels different when there's no one waiting for you to come home. Around the 6th or 7th month, the silence stops feeling peaceful. It feels like pressure, heavy, constant, closing in from every side. The world that once cheered for her has gone quiet. The friends who called her brave are back to their routines. The dinner invites slow down. The texts arrive less often. Everyone assumes she's thriving because that's the story she told them. And now she has to keep playing the role, so she performs. Smiling for photos, posting pictures of coffee cups and sunsets, writing captions about healing and growth. Every word is a costume she slips into before facing the world. But when the camera's off, the house is still empty. The walls echo back her own voice. And that's when the panic begins. It's subtle at first. An extra glass of wine, a new hobby, a few too many nights out. Anything to keep from sitting still. Because stillness means thinking, and thinking means remembering. Then comes the insomnia, the racing thoughts, the sudden urge to reach for her phone at 1 a.m. Hey, just thinking about you. She tells herself it's harmless, just curiosity. But deep down, she knows it's not curiosity. It's craving. Not for him, but for what she used to feel when life made sense. This is what psychologists call dissonance, the war between two truths she can't reconcile. I made the right choice. I'm miserable. To hold both at once requires energy she no longer has. So she builds distractions, entire performances to drown out the contradiction. Work harder, travel more, stay busy, smile wider, but nothing fills the quiet. Nothing stops the ache of realizing that happiness feels heavier when you have to perform it. The panic doesn't come from loneliness. It comes from awareness. She can't escape the thought that keeps clawing its way to the surface. The one she's tried to silence with every new experience, every post, every drink. It's not the loneliness that hurts. It's realizing she chose it. A year passes, and the story she built begins to collapse under its own weight. The glow is gone. The apartment feels smaller. The nights feel longer. The air tastes like something unfinished. There's no more dopamine left to burn. Just the quiet aftermath of choices that once felt powerful. This is the point where most women start to rewrite history. She tells herself it wasn't regret, it was growth. That leaving wasn't a mistake, it was destiny. But deep inside, where no one else can hear her, the doubt begins to whisper. Maybe the marriage wasn't as bad as she remembered. Maybe the problem wasn't him. Maybe it was her restlessness. The hunger for something she couldn't name, something she thought she'd find outside the life she built. But she can't admit that. Admitting it would destroy the entire identity she spent a year defending. She became the woman who was brave enough to leave, the woman who inspired others, who turned pain into power. To admit regret now would mean dismantling the only version of herself she still believes in. So she keeps rewriting. Maybe he's changed. Maybe we could have worked if... She builds small fantasies out of broken truths, gentle enough to soothe, fragile enough to protect her pride. Yet the regret seeps through anyway, quiet but relentless. It visits her in the spaces between distractions, when the house is still, when the children are asleep, when the night feels too honest to lie to. She scrolls through old photos, stopping at one where she's laughing. Not posing, not pretending, just laughing. And the realization lands like smoke in her chest. She can't go back there. Not to that moment, not to that version of herself, not to him. Regret without redemption. That's what this is. Like living inside a house she set on fire, standing in the ashes, refusing to leave because she's the one who lit the match. For the first time, she doesn't want freedom. She wants home. At first, her friends were her army. They cheered her on through every step of the separation, sent quotes about strength, took her out for drinks, reposted her new selfies with words like queen, brave, and finally free. But that chorus doesn't last. Slowly, the noise fades, the messages stop. The group chat grows quiet, and one day, she notices something strange. The world that once celebrated her has gone still. Her married friends begin to pull away. Not out of malice, but instinct. She represents something uncomfortable now. A reminder that marriages end, that security isn't guaranteed. Invitations to dinner disappear. Weekend getaways happen without her. She doesn't even hear about them until she sees the pictures online. Her single friends, the ones she thought would be her new circle, aren't much better. At first, they welcome her. Brunches, nights out, long talks about dating and finding yourself. But soon, tension creeps in. They're all fishing in the same pond, chasing the same attention, and she carries baggage they don't want to compete with. Kids, history, complication. She realizes she doesn't fit anywhere anymore. Too single for her married friends. Too experienced for the single ones. Too tired to start over. Too proud to admit she's lonely. She scrolls through her phone, thumb hovering over names she hasn't spoken to in months. The courage to reach out comes and goes. She imagines the conversation, the polite tone, the forced laughter, and closes the app instead. There's a particular kind of silence that follows social death. It's not anger or betrayal. It's indifference. The world simply moves on, leaving her behind in a life that used to feel full. She thought she'd gain the world when she walked away. What she gained was space, wide, empty, and echoing. She left believing she was stepping into something bigger, but the truth is quieter, lonelier, and harder to admit. She left a marriage thinking she'd gain the world, but the world moved on without her. When a marriage lasts long enough, it doesn't just shape your life, it shapes your identity. You stop being an individual and start being half of a unit, a rhythm built for two. Every habit, every decision, every weekend plan quietly includes the other person, even when they're not in the room. And when that rhythm stops, the silence isn't just emotional, it's existential. She wakes up on the wrong side of the bed because there is no her side anymore. The house feels too large and too small at the same time. The question, "What do you want for dinner?" used to be simple. Now it's a mirror reflecting back the emptiness of her own indecision. She wanders through grocery aisles unsure what to buy, because for years she bought for two. She sits through movies that don't make her laugh, turns off lights no one else will see. Every ordinary action now feels like proof that her life has been split open. She thought independence would mean strength, self-sufficiency, power. But no one told her that independence without belonging feels like exile. There's the financial reality too, the one no caption talks about. The dual income is gone, the safety net, the shared goals, the comfort of knowing someone else is watching your back, gone. She's not poor, but everything feels smaller now. The apartment, the budget, the dreams, and then there's the body, its quiet rebellion. Days without touch turn into weeks, weeks into months. She didn't realize how much the human body depends on warmth, a hand brushing hers in passing, a familiar shoulder against her back. Now her skin feels starved. The stress creeps in. Sleep falters. Her body aches in ways that have nothing to do with age. Freedom was supposed to feel alive, but it feels like a room she can't escape, decorated to look empowering, but filled with echoes. She stares at her reflection and hardly recognizes the woman looking back. A stranger built from fragments of old lives and broken certainties. She wanted independence. What she got was isolation. It always happens suddenly. Sometimes it's a random moment, seeing him in a photo, hearing his laugh in their child's voice, catching a glimpse of him with someone new. But when it hits, it's like gravity returning all at once. 2 years have passed. The chaos has settled into monotony. She's stopped pretending she's happy, but she still tells herself she's fine. Until that one moment when she sees him again, different, calmer, stronger. His eyes no longer carry the weight she left him with. He's changed. And that's when she realizes something she's never said out loud. He didn't fall apart. He rebuilt. That realization cuts deeper than any breakup ever could, because it proves what she's avoided all along. He was never the problem. He was unfinished, like she was. Flawed, yes, but real. And in leaving him, she didn't escape pain. She just postponed it. Now she sees him with someone else. Someone younger, maybe, or simply someone who looks at him with the softness she used to have. The sight hits her like a confession she never meant to make. Her chest tightens, not from jealousy, but from awareness. This is what she wanted. A man who had grown, who had healed, who had learned. but he became that man without her. The irony is cruel. She created the version of him she always claimed to want, but she's no longer invited into the story. She drives home in silence, replaying old memories that don't hurt anymore. They haunt. The nights they argued. The mornings they laughed. The life she decided wasn't enough. Now she understands. She didn't leave a bad man. She left a reality she misunderstood. It wasn't that the marriage was broken. It was her perception of it, and perception, once shattered, can't be rebuilt. Every happy couple she passes now reflects her own mistake back at her, not as cruelty, but as truth. She watches them, the way one watches a window from outside on a cold night, wondering how she ever thought warmth was a cage. Every happy couple she passes is a mirror reflecting the life she destroyed. Freedom, validation, awakening, panic, reckoning, collapse, identity, realization. It's not random, it's a sequence, almost mathematical in its precision. Every stage feels unique while she's living it, but when you step back, it's a pattern. This isn't a condemnation of women. It's a map of the illusions we're all capable of creating when we confuse desire with truth. She thought she was walking toward a new life. In reality, she was walking in circles, chasing the reflection of a fantasy she couldn't sustain. The tragedy isn't that she left, it's that she left believing she was escaping something external, when what she was really trying to escape lived inside her. And when the noise faded, the validation, the attention, the narrative, she was left face to face with the one thing she'd spent years avoiding, herself. If you're a man watching this, understand this clearly. Her story is not your punishment, it's your protection. The same illusions that consumed her can consume you too. The belief that happiness exists outside of discipline, that love is a feeling instead of a practice, that validation equals value. Don't chase revenge. Don't chase closure. Just watch. Learn. Because what broke her doesn't have to break you. There's a cruel kind of peace that comes from seeing reality as it is. Not through resentment, not through nostalgia, but through understanding. That's the kind of clarity men rarely get to have because they're too busy reacting to the pain instead of studying it. She thought she was chasing freedom, but freedom without truth is just another kind of prison. And the moment you understand that, truly understand it, is the moment you stop living in reaction to her story and start writing your own. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to the Female Code. Because understanding women isn't about judgment. It's about power, clarity, and control. Right now, somewhere, a man is checking his phone, waiting for a message that will never come, from a woman who goes home to someone else. He tells himself this is real, that she loves him, but can't leave yet. He believes he's the exception, not the rule. But what if I told you his story has already been written, word for word, heartbreak for heartbreak, by thousands before him? What if the love he's fighting for is just a chemical illusion his brain refuses to break? This isn't about romance. It's about captivity. And in the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly how smart men become prisoners in their own fantasies, and what it takes to finally walk free. There's a reason men fall hardest for women they can't fully have. It's not weakness, it's wiring, the brain's cruel way of turning scarcity into obsession. But no one talks about that because it ruins the fantasy. The truth is, the less she gives, the more you crave. It's not romance, it's reinforcement. And the deeper you go, the more you confuse adrenaline for intimacy. If you want to learn what's really driving your attraction, like this video and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, do you think desire comes from love or from scarcity? Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal next will make you question everything you thought you knew about emotional chemistry. There's always that first moment, the quiet conviction that this is different. You tell yourself it's not what it looks like. She isn't just some married woman chasing attention. She's misunderstood, unloved, trapped in a home that's grown cold. And you're her escape, her light, her late arrival in a story that fate simply mistimed. You replay her words, "I wish I met you first." They echo like a promise, like proof that what you have is real. You imagine her lying awake beside her husband, thinking of you. You tell yourself that makes it honest somehow, that love can't be wrong if it feels this right. But it isn't love. It's a story you've written to survive the guilt. That's the first lie. The belief that you're the exception. That what destroys others will somehow spare you. It's not arrogance. It's self-preservation. Your mind builds a fantasy to protect your ego from the truth. You're sharing a woman who already belongs elsewhere. You mistake her tears for honesty, her confessions for depth. You think pain means passion and secrecy means soul connection. The reality is far less romantic. This script has existed for centuries, and you're just the latest actor reciting his lines. The same messages, the same promises, the same silent heartbreak waiting at the end. Every man in this story swore his situation was different, that theirs was love, not betrayal. Every one of them said she was unlike the others. Every one of them discovered too late that they were identical. You're not writing your own story. You're performing in a play written long before you arrived, one with no happy ending, just a cycle of illusion and loss disguised as intimacy. What you're feeling isn't love, it's chemistry, the cruelest illusion your body can create. Each secret message, every whispered conversation, every moment you steal from reality triggers a surge in your brain so powerful it could rival a drug high. Dopamine, adrenaline, oxytocin, the holy trinity of emotional intoxication. The forbidden makes the rush stronger. The distance turns desire into obsession. You think she makes you feel alive. But that aliveness is simply your nervous system on overdrive, a cocktail of anticipation and reward designed to keep you chasing what you can't fully have. It's not affection. It's the thrill of uncertainty. You never know when she'll call, when she'll disappear, or when she'll whisper your name again. That unpredictability becomes the hook, the very thing that keeps you bound. Your brain doesn't crave her. It craves the next hit, the next text, the next touch, the next validation that you still matter to her. The pain of her absence amplifies the pleasure of her return. You call that passion. Biology calls it addiction. And like any addiction, the tolerance builds. What once felt electrifying now barely sustains you. You'll need more secrecy, more danger, more intensity to feel the same spark. You start mistaking emotional chaos for depth, withdrawal for longing. The more it hurts, the more you convince yourself it must be real. But love isn't supposed to feel like withdrawal. Love doesn't spike your dopamine like a slot machine. Love doesn't keep you pacing, checking your phone, bargaining with silence. She's not your soulmate. She's your supplier. And you, without realizing it, have become the addict who romanticizes his own captivity. Your brain isn't in love. It's high. And like every high, it will crash. The only question is how much of yourself will burn out before the chemistry fades. If I told your story without your name, it would sound just like thousands of others. Different cities, different faces, same lines. A man meets a married woman. He feels seen in a way he hasn't in years. She feels desired, alive, validated. They tell themselves it's destiny, not destruction. And yet every chapter unfolds exactly the same. The stolen glances, the late-night messages, the whispered promises of someday. You believe you're writing a love story, but it's a play that's been running for generations. Act 1. the spark, intoxicating and immediate. Act 2, the justification. Her husband doesn't understand her. You're different. This connection is fate. Act 3, guilt and hope twisted together until you can't tell them apart. Act 4, collapse. Always collapse. You think this pattern is coincidence, but it's psychology. The human mind clings to narratives that make its contradictions bearable. You can't see yourself as a villain, so you cast yourself as the hero, the savior rescuing a woman trapped in the wrong life. She plays her part too, the misunderstood victim. Together, you build a story that feels redemptive, even as it corrodes you both. Every affair relies on this script. Without it, the illusion dies. You don't want love. You want meaning. And this story gives it to you. It tells you that the risk is noble, that the suffering is proof of depth. But all you've done is memorize your lines. The truth is brutally simple. You didn't fall in love. You fell into a role, one rehearsed, recycled, and always tragic. The moment you start believing you're the exception, the ending has already begun. You don't see it yet, but you're not her hero. You're her narrative device, a subplot that will vanish when the main story demands it. You may think she's 1 in a million. The truth is, she's 1 of 4. Every woman who crosses this line wears a mask, sometimes more than one. Each mask hides the same hunger, the need to feel alive without facing what's broken inside. The first is the validator. She's not chasing love, she's chasing proof that she still matters. Time and routine have eroded her reflection, and you become the mirror that restores it. She feeds on your attention like oxygen, glowing under the warmth of your desire. But once her confidence refills, once she believes she's still wanted, she'll withdraw, quietly, gently, leaving you starving for the validation you once gave her. Then there's the dramatist. She doesn't crave affection, she craves chaos. She lives for the tension, the tears, the thrill of almost getting caught. You're not her partner, you're her storyline. Every fight, every reconciliation is an episode in her private soap opera. She won't end it, because the drama is the pulse that convinces her she's still alive. The escapist is different. She truly believes she's leaving her husband, until she does. And when the secrecy dies, so does the spark. The ordinary routine of a visible relationship strips away the fantasy. You become what she once fled from. Stability, familiarity, predictability. She will start searching for the next escape, just like before. Finally, the strategist. The coldest one. She knows she's not leaving her marriage, but she'll never say it. She gives you just enough, a text here, a confession there, to keep you loyal. You're her emotional insurance policy, a backup source of attention in case her home life runs dry. 4 masks, 1 motive, to feel alive without facing themselves. You think you've found love, but you've only stumbled into someone else's coping mechanism. There's a quiet shift that happens long before you realize it. At first, the secrecy feels thrilling, a private world only the two of you share. But over time, it changes you. You begin to speak in half-truths, to compartmentalize, to live split between 2 realities. What you once called passion becomes performance. What you once justified as love becomes deceit, repackaged and rehearsed. It doesn't happen all at once. The erosion is subtle, almost elegant. You start lying to her husband by default, then to your friends, then to yourself. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll stop when it gets too complicated. But the truth is, you already have. You've become someone who hides in shadows, someone who accepts partial affection as reward. There's a cost to being the secret. At first it's invisible, a slight discomfort you can ignore. Then it becomes heavy, like carrying guilt in your bloodstream. You begin to believe you don't deserve anything better. You convince yourself that real love isn't meant for you, that you're built for the margins, not the spotlight. Integrity isn't something that breaks in a single moment. It dissolves molecule by molecule until there's nothing left to hold you upright. And when you lose integrity, you lose the ability to see yourself clearly. You start mistaking shame for depth, confusion for complexity. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Once you become comfortable as the secret, you stop believing you're worthy of being chosen publicly. You normalize invisibility. You confuse it with intimacy. When you live as a secret, you stop believing you deserve to be seen. And that's the real damage. Not the affair itself, but what it teaches you to accept. You think she has power over you because of love? But it isn't love that binds you, it's the pattern. A system of reward and deprivation so precise that even scientists use it to explain addiction. She disappears just long enough for your anxiety to peak, then reappears when you're starving for connection. That relief you feel when her name flashes on your phone, that's the hit. That's the rush your body has been begging for. Sometimes she answers immediately, flooding you with attention. Other times she vanishes for days, leaving you restless, scrolling, replaying every word she said. You never know which version of her you'll get, and that's what keeps you coming back. The unpredictability is the drug. It tricks your brain into believing that every small reward, every message, every touch is sacred. It's called intermittent reinforcement, the strongest form of behavioral conditioning known to psychology. Casinos use it. Social media uses it. And now, without realizing it, she does too. Not because she's cruel, but because instinctively she understands the rhythm of desire. Absence amplifies value. The less she gives, the more you crave. You tell yourself it's chemistry, destiny, a bond no one could understand. But it's just repetition, stimulus and response, craving and release. You've been trained, not loved. Conditioned to equate pain with passion, silence with depth, scarcity with worth. What you call waiting for her is really your nervous system begging for another dopamine spike. And like any addiction, the withdrawal feels like dying. That's why you chase her. Not because she's irreplaceable, but because the next hit feels like survival. The cruelest part? She doesn't even have to try. All she has to do is disappear. You call it chemistry. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. And the only way out is to stop playing the game, to recognize that the jackpot you keep chasing is just your own loneliness, flashing back at you in neon. It always ends the same way, quietly, suddenly, without ceremony. One day she simply stops calling, or maybe she tells you it's too hard, that she needs to focus on her family, that it's not fair to anyone anymore. You tell yourself you understand, but deep down, you feel something break. The silence that follows isn't peace, it's withdrawal. You scroll through old messages, looking for signs, for the exact moment she began to drift. You tell yourself she'll come back, that she always does. But this time, she doesn't. She's home, rebuilding what she never truly left. And you're alone, left with the fragments of a fantasy that only ever belonged to you. At first, it feels like heartbreak, the same burning in your chest, the same ache behind your ribs. But heartbreak assumes love was real. What you're experiencing is detox. Your body is crashing from the chemical high of emotional chaos. The same dopamine that once made her messages feel electric now abandons you, leaving only emptiness in its wake. You don't just lose her. You lose the version of yourself who believed this meant something. The man who waited, who justified, who built his life around the next text. He dies here. What remains is someone raw, exposed, and unsure of what's real anymore. This is the moment of truth. The clarity that comes only after everything collapses. You finally see the full picture. How every promise, every secret, every sleepless night was part of a story that was never meant to last. It's brutal, yes, but it's also cleansing. Because this isn't heartbreak, it's detox, the purging of illusion from your bloodstream. And though it feels like death, it's the first honest thing that's happened to you in a long time. Recovery isn't about getting her back. It's about getting yourself back. The parts of you that disappeared while you were waiting for something that was never really yours. The strength you traded for longing. The clarity you buried under her chaos. The dignity you surrendered one secret at a time. Freedom begins in silence. No goodbyes, no explanations, no just checking in. Every word pulls you back into the web. You can't reason with an addiction. You can only starve it, delete the messages, block the number, remove every trace of her existence from your digital life. It won't feel empowering at first. It'll feel like withdrawal. That's how you know it's working. Then comes the light. Confession. Tell someone you trust what happened. Not to seek sympathy, but to kill the shame that thrives in secrecy. Once spoken aloud, it loses its power. That's how healing begins. Not in punishment, but in truth. Rebuilding boundaries follows. Learn to recognize what real availability feels like. No more waiting, no more half-love. Real love shows up. It calls back. It stays. It doesn't ask you to hide, to lie, or to shrink. And finally, redefine love itself. Understand that intensity is not intimacy, and chaos is not connection. Love is steady, sometimes quiet, but always honest. It doesn't need danger to feel alive. It builds, it roots, it endures. You stand now at a crossroads, between the fantasy that destroyed you and the peace that can rebuild you. One path will always be louder, brighter, more intoxicating. The other will feel ordinary, even dull at first. But that's the one that's real. So ask yourself, will you keep chasing chaos, or will you choose calm? Real love doesn't hide in hotel rooms. It stands in daylight. In the end, it was never about her. It was about you. About the story you told yourself to justify the pain, the illusion you built to make chaos feel like meaning. You called it love, because calling it addiction would have made you see the truth too soon. But now you know. You've walked through every stage of the trap, the fantasy, the chemistry, the collapse. You've watched how longing became dependency, how deception reshaped who you were. But awareness is the first sign of freedom. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize the cost, you stop paying it. There's a quiet power in choosing yourself. Not the ego-driven version of, I don't need anyone, but the grounded strength of a man who refuses to betray his own peace again. The kind of man who values truth over tension, respect over excitement, calm over chaos. And that's where your new story begins. Not in another affair, not in chasing validation, but in stillness. In the slow, unglamorous work of rebuilding your integrity. In learning to love without needing to be rescued or to rescue anyone else. Because real love doesn't demand secrets. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't exist in fragments. It meets you in the open, and it stays. If this message hits somewhere deep, don't scroll away. Let it sit with you. Let it sting a little. Pain is often the sound of illusion breaking. And when you're ready, speak. Tell me what part of your story you're finally ready to rewrite. Subscribe if you're done chasing chaos and ready to rebuild from truth. Because the next chapter isn't about her, it's about you. A lot of men think they're entering a relationship when they date a single mother. But what they're really entering is a life that was already in motion long before they arrived. And most men don't realize how heavy that reality is until they're emotionally trapped inside it. At first, she feels different from other women, more mature, more grounded, less interested in games. She talks about loyalty, stability, peace. And after years of dealing with chaos in modern dating, that sounds exactly like the kind of woman a man should want. But slowly, something changes. You start noticing that no matter how much effort you give, you're always adapting to a life that doesn't revolve around you. The schedule isn't yours. The emotional energy isn't fully available. The priorities were decided before you ever showed up. And little by little, many men begin to feel something they never expected to feel inside a relationship. Alone. Because this isn't just about love. It's about emotional weight, invisible sacrifices, and responsibilities most men never fully see until they're already deeply attached. And today, I want to show you the truths almost nobody warns men about before they step into this kind of situation. If you've ever dated a single mother, or found yourself carrying emotional pressure that didn't originally belong to you, type, "I learned the hard way" in the comments below. Because the men who get hurt the most are usually the ones who ignored the quiet warning signs in the beginning. One of the biggest mistakes men make when dating a single mother is assuming they're simply dating a woman who happens to have children. That sounds small in theory, but in reality, it changes the entire structure of the relationship. You're not entering an empty space where two people build a life together from the ground up. You're stepping into a system that already exists. The routines are already established. The emotional priorities are already assigned. The stress, the responsibilities, the unfinished wounds, the financial pressure, the parenting dynamics, all of it was there before you arrived. And at first, many men underestimate this because attraction clouds judgment. She feels emotionally safer than younger women, more appreciative, more serious. She tells you she's tired of games, tired of unstable men, tired of chaos. And for a man who wants peace, that sounds incredibly attractive. But what most men don't understand is that exhausted people often confuse stability with emotional availability. Those are not the same thing. A woman can genuinely want love while still being emotionally overloaded. And when a woman is overloaded, the relationship slowly becomes another responsibility she's trying to manage instead of a connection she has energy to nurture. That's when the emotional shift begins. You start out feeling chosen. Then gradually, you start feeling managed, scheduled, fitted into the empty spaces of someone else's already crowded life. And this is where many men begin to feel guilty for emotions they never expected to have. Because part of them starts wondering something they're almost afraid to admit out loud. Am I building a future here? Or am I helping someone survive the consequences of their past? That question changes everything. And the first painful reality most men run into after that is understanding exactly where they rank in her life. Now let me say something clearly before we go any further. A good mother should put her children first. Any woman who abandons her children emotionally for a new man is not emotionally healthy. So this is not about blaming women for loving their kids. That's not the issue. The issue is what that reality quietly does to the man in the relationship over time. Because many men enter these situations believing love will naturally create emotional balance. But eventually, they discover something difficult. No matter how loyal they are, no matter how much they provide, they will always exist below another emotional hierarchy they did not create. And at first, it seems manageable. Plans get cancelled because one of the kids is sick. She's emotionally drained after dealing with school issues, custody stress, or non-stop responsibilities. Conversations get interrupted. Intimacy becomes inconsistent. Your relationship slowly starts operating around exhaustion instead of connection. And men try to be understanding. Most genuinely do. But understanding something logically and feeling fulfilled emotionally are two very different things. This is why so many men slowly begin to feel emotionally invisible inside these relationships. Not abused, not betrayed, just emotionally unfed. You stop feeling like someone's partner and start feeling like emotional support staff inside a life that already belongs to other people. And the dangerous part is that many men silence their own needs because they feel guilty even having them. They think, she's doing her best, I shouldn't complain. So they suppress the loneliness, they suppress the resentment, they suppress the disappointment. Until one day, they realize they haven't felt genuinely prioritized in months, maybe years. And that emotional starvation changes a man, because men don't only stay where they are needed, they stay where they feel chosen. A man can tolerate pressure for a long time, but eventually, every man reaches a breaking point when he feels like he's constantly receiving whatever emotional energy is left over after everyone else has already taken their piece. And the children are only part of the equation. Because there's another presence inside these relationships most men underestimate from the beginning. A lot of men believe they're only dating her. But the truth is, in most cases, there's another man whose presence never fully disappears from the relationship. Even if he's no longer sleeping beside her. Even if she claims she hates him. Even if the relationship ended years ago. The father of her children is still connected to her life in ways you can never completely remove. And this creates a psychological tension many men struggle to explain out loud. If he's active in the children's lives, then his influence is constant. His schedule affects your schedule. His decisions affect your plans. His texts interrupt your evenings. Holidays, birthdays, emergencies, school events. Another man's existence is permanently woven into the relationship you're trying to build. And no matter how mature you try to be, that dynamic wears on many men emotionally. Not because they're insecure, but because masculine energy naturally wants clarity, leadership, and emotional territory. It's difficult for many men to fully relax inside a situation where another man's shadow constantly shapes the environment around them. And if he's absent, that creates a different kind of tension. Now the questions begin. Why did the relationship collapse? Was he irresponsible from the beginning? Did she ignore obvious red flags? Did both of them create toxic conflict together? Was the chaos mutual? Because whether people admit it or not, a woman's past relationship choices reveal patterns about her emotional judgment. And here's the part most men discover too late. Even when she's emotionally over him romantically, she's rarely fully disconnected psychologically. They share history, trauma, memories, children, emotional scars, sometimes unresolved anger, sometimes unresolved attachment. The relationship may be dead, but the emotional footprint often survives long after the romance is gone. And over time, many men begin realizing they're not building something entirely new. They're trying to find stability inside emotional debris left behind by another relationship. And eventually, that pressure creates one of the most frustrating dynamics a man can experience. Because now he's expected to carry responsibility inside a household where he still has very little real authority. This is the point where many men begin feeling trapped without fully understanding why. Because the role they slowly fall into is emotionally exhausting by design. You're expected to help, expected to contribute, expected to protect, expected to provide emotional stability inside the household. And if you truly care about the woman, you naturally want to step up. Most good men do. But here's where the tension begins. You are carrying responsibility inside a structure where you do not hold real authority. You are not the father, which means your influence always has limits. You can help raise the children, but your ability to correct behavior depends entirely on her approval. You can contribute financially, but major parenting decisions may still happen without your voice mattering. You can sacrifice your peace for the household, yet still be reminded during conflict that these are not your children. That contradiction slowly destroys many men psychologically, Because masculine energy needs alignment between responsibility and authority. Men function best when the burdens they carry match the influence they possess. When those two things separate, resentment quietly begins growing underneath the relationship. And children sense this dynamic faster than adults realize. Kids are extremely sensitive to power structures inside a home. They quickly recognize when a man is expected to support the household but doesn't truly hold authority within it. Some children become resistant. Others test boundaries constantly. Others create emotional distance because they don't fully accept him as permanent. And the man ends up in an impossible position. If he becomes too involved, he's controlling. If he stays distant, he's cold. If he disciplines, he's overstepping. If he says nothing, he's weak or uninvolved. So many men spend years walking on emotional eggshells inside relationships where they can never fully relax. And eventually, exhaustion starts replacing love. Because there's a brutal psychological truth many men learn too late. A man can handle pressure far better than confusion. But when he's constantly expected to act like a father while simultaneously being reminded he isn't one, his emotional stability slowly begins collapsing from the inside out. And once emotional attachment deepens, another pressure usually begins appearing quietly in the background. Money. Most men don't walk into these relationships expecting to become providers. In the beginning, it rarely feels that serious. Maybe you help with dinner once in a while. Maybe you pay for small things. Maybe you step in during stressful moments because you care about her and the children. And honestly, none of that feels wrong. A good man naturally wants to help the people he loves. But emotional attachment changes financial boundaries faster than most men realize. Because once you become emotionally connected to someone's daily struggles, saying no starts feeling emotionally cruel. Now the child needs something important. School expenses appear. Emergencies happen. The cost of daily life keeps expanding. And slowly, without ever having a direct conversation about it, many men find themselves carrying financial pressure they never consciously agreed to carry. And what makes this dynamic psychologically dangerous is that the pressure is often indirect. Nobody explicitly says, "You must provide." Instead, the guilt does the work. You see her overwhelmed. You see the children needing support. You see stress building around the household. And because you care, your instinct pushes you to solve problems. That's how many men are wired emotionally. But over time, something subtle begins happening inside him. He starts noticing that his resources, energy, and peace are flowing toward responsibilities he did not create. And if appreciation is missing, that sacrifice slowly transforms into quiet resentment. Because a man can willingly sacrifice for people he feels deeply connected to. But when sacrifice becomes expected instead of appreciated, love begins turning into emotional exhaustion. And this is where many men become trapped psychologically. If they pull back financially, they feel selfish. If they continue overextending themselves, they slowly lose their sense of freedom, control, and emotional balance. The fastest way to drain a man emotionally is to make him responsible for solving problems that were already there before he arrived. And eventually, after enough pressure builds, many men begin asking themselves a painful question they can no longer ignore. Am I loved for who I am, or valued for what I can carry? This is usually the stage where resentment quietly enters the relationship. Not explosive anger, not screaming fights, just a slow emotional heaviness building underneath everything. And the reason is almost always the same. The man begins feeling like he's paying emotional consequences for choices he never made. He listens to her talk about wanting stability, maturity, loyalty, emotional intelligence, consistency. She says she's tired of toxic men, tired of chaos, tired of being hurt, and part of him understands that completely. But another part of him starts noticing something uncomfortable. The man who created the chaos often received access to her during her most emotionally open years. He received passion before the requirements became strict. He received children before stability became mandatory. Now the safe man arrives later and is expected to carry responsibilities the reckless man never had to carry. That realization creates a psychological conflict many men struggle to verbalize without sounding bitter. Because deep down, some men begin feeling like they were chosen for utility instead of desire. Not because she's intentionally manipulating them. Sometimes she genuinely believes she has matured and learned from painful experiences. Sometimes she truly wants peace now. But male psychology reacts very strongly to feeling emotionally transactional. A man wants to feel desired for who he is, not selected because he's emotionally stable enough to repair damage left behind by another relationship. And once that perception enters his mind, the emotional energy shifts dramatically. He stops feeling special. He starts feeling practical, like a solution, like emotional insurance, like the responsible option after somebody else already experienced the exciting version of her. That feeling destroys attraction faster than most women realize. Because men can survive pressure. Men can survive sacrifice. But many men emotionally shut down once they feel replaceable, interchangeable, or primarily valued for what they provide. Now let me be fair here. Not every single mother creates this dynamic. Some are deeply appreciative. Some are emotionally accountable. Some genuinely build healthy relationships. But the pattern exists often enough that many men instinctively become cautious when they see it forming. And that caution becomes even stronger once men begin understanding how dating dynamics actually work beneath the surface. One of the biggest lies modern dating culture tells people is that emotions alone determine relationship outcomes. They don't. Feelings matter. Chemistry matters. Attraction matters. But long-term commitment is also deeply influenced by practicality, options, lifestyle compatibility, emotional cost, and perceived difficulty. And this is where many men start becoming brutally honest with themselves. A man who has options evaluates situations differently than a man who feels desperate for connection. That's just reality. When a man is emotionally stable, financially established, and capable of attracting different kinds of women, he naturally begins asking practical questions before committing his life to someone. How much peace will this relationship bring? How much pressure will it create? Will my life become simpler or heavier? And this is where single mothers face a difficult reality many people are afraid to say out loud. Even when the woman herself is attractive, kind, intelligent, and emotionally genuine, the situation around her still carries complications many men would rather avoid. The ex-partner, the divided priorities, the emotional baggage, the financial pressure, the lack of flexibility, the possibility of attachment without security. Men absolutely notice these things. Not because men are heartless, but because commitment always involves risk assessment, whether people admit it or not. And unfortunately, many women receive advice that completely ignores male psychology. They're told, the right man won't care. But emotionally intelligent men do care. Responsible men evaluate consequences before stepping into situations that can permanently affect their peace, finances, and emotional stability. Love is emotional. Commitment is strategic. And the men who ignore strategy entirely often become the same men sitting alone years later, wondering why they feel emotionally drained, financially burdened, and psychologically trapped inside relationships they entered blindly. Now I want you to be honest with yourself for a second. Do men usually fall in love emotionally first? Or do they commit after evaluating whether the situation actually makes sense long term? Because understanding that difference explains why so many men hesitate the moment they see certain realities. And the biggest reality most men underestimate is not logistical, it's emotional. The deepest risk in these relationships is not money, it's attachment. Because over time, many men stop seeing the children as her kids. They become part of his emotional world too. He picks them up from school. He teaches them things. He helps with homework. He comforts them when they cry. He shows up for birthdays, dinners, small moments that slowly build emotional connection without him even realizing how attached he's becoming. And this is where many men get blindsided emotionally. Because if the relationship ends, those children usually disappear from his life overnight. No legal rights, no custody, no guaranteed contact. No protection for the emotional bond he spent years building. One breakup can erase an entire emotional world he invested himself into. And many men discover something painful in that moment. They're not only grieving the woman, they're grieving the loss of children they loved like family. That kind of emotional loss changes men deeply, especially because society rarely acknowledges it. People talk about the mother's pain, the children's pain, but very few people talk about the man who emotionally invested himself into a family structure he was never truly protected inside. And this is why experienced men become extremely cautious about emotional attachment in complicated relationships. Because once a man bonds emotionally, logic becomes weaker. Boundaries become weaker. His willingness to tolerate unhealthy dynamics increases because now he's terrified of losing people he genuinely loves. You can spend years pouring your energy, protection, guidance, and heart into a family that legally and emotionally can vanish from your life in a single conversation. And that's why entering this kind of relationship blindly is one of the most dangerous emotional decisions many men will ever make. But at the same time, I also need to say something important. Not every situation ends badly. Now, I don't want this conversation to become emotionally lazy or cynical, because not every relationship with a single mother is doomed. Some are genuinely healthy. Some become deeply loving partnerships. Some men step into these situations fully aware of the challenges and still build something meaningful. But the reason those relationships work is usually very different from what people assume. Healthy situations are built on realism, not fantasy. The woman is emotionally accountable. She doesn't minimize the complications. She respects the sacrifices being made instead of acting entitled to them. She has healthy boundaries with the father of her children. She's emotionally healed enough to stop dragging old trauma into new relationships. And equally important, the man enters the relationship intentionally. Not because he feels lonely, not because he thinks he can save her, not because he's afraid he can't attract anyone else. He chooses the situation with clear eyes. That changes everything. Older children also tend to create less emotional chaos than younger children, less dependency, less constant crisis management, more room for an actual adult relationship to exist. And some men genuinely want family life, even if the children are not biologically theirs. For emotionally mature men with stable lives, the complications may not feel overwhelming because they are choosing companionship and emotional connection from a grounded place rather than emotional desperation. That distinction matters more than people realize, because complicated relationships only survive when both people stop pretending the situation is simple. Love alone is never enough to overcome denial. Awareness matters. Boundaries matter. Emotional maturity matters. And before any man commits himself fully to this kind of relationship, there are a few truths he absolutely must be honest enough to face. Before a man commits himself to a relationship like this, he needs to stop listening to fantasy and start paying attention to patterns. Because many men don't enter complicated relationships logically. They enter emotionally. And emotions are very good at making temporary feelings look permanent. So the first thing a man needs to ask himself is brutally simple. Am I choosing this woman specifically? Or am I choosing the opportunity to not be alone? That question matters more than most men realize, because loneliness makes men tolerate situations they would normally walk away from. Fear lowers standards quietly, A man who secretly doubts his own value often convinces himself he should just accept emotional conditions that don't truly make him happy. And that almost always becomes resentment later. The second thing he must examine honestly is her relationship history and emotional patterns. Not to shame her, not to punish her, but to understand what kind of emotional environment he's stepping into. Does she take accountability for her past choices? Does she constantly blame everyone else? Does she create peace or constant emotional turbulence? How does she handle conflict? How does she speak about the father of her children when emotions rise? Because unresolved emotional chaos always leaks into new relationships eventually. Third, never ignore your hesitation. Men often feel warning signs long before they can explain them logically. The body notices emotional imbalance before the mind fully organizes it into words. That quiet discomfort many men feel at the beginning is not always insecurity. Sometimes it's pattern recognition. And finally, protect yourself. Emotionally, financially, psychologically. Do not rush cohabitation. Do not overextend yourself financially out of guilt. Do not hand over emotional leadership just because you feel sympathy for someone's difficult circumstances. A compassionate man without boundaries becomes easy to drain. And one of the most important things you should watch carefully is her attitude toward your sacrifice. A woman who truly respects your effort behaves very differently from a woman who simply expects it. Gratitude creates connection. Entitlement destroys it. Because at the end of the day, most men are not destroyed by women. They are destroyed by stepping into situations they never fully understood until it was too late to leave without losing pieces of themselves. And that is the real trap most men never see coming. The truth is, this conversation was never really about single mothers. It was about awareness. Because many men enter relationships believing love will automatically erase pressure, complications, emotional baggage, or structural imbalance. But relationships don't work that way. Attraction can make a situation feel exciting in the beginning, yet reality always reveals itself over time. And the men who suffer the most are usually not the weakest men. They're often the most compassionate ones. The men who try to help. The men who try to understand. The men who silence their own emotional needs because they don't want to seem selfish or unkind. But there's a difference between being loving and abandoning yourself emotionally. A strong man does not ignore reality just because he feels emotionally attached. He asks difficult questions before he sacrifices years of his peace, finances, emotional stability, and future for a situation he may never truly feel secure inside. That doesn't mean every relationship with a single mother is doomed. Some become beautiful partnerships built on honesty, maturity, and mutual respect. But blind emotional investment is dangerous in any relationship, especially when the emotional structure was already complicated before you arrived. The danger is not loving a woman with children. The danger is stepping into a life you never fully understood until you were already emotionally trapped inside it. So if this video spoke to something you've experienced personally, leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what lessons life taught you that nobody warned you about beforehand. And if you're a man trying to understand female psychology, emotional dynamics, and the hidden patterns modern relationships are built on, subscribe and stay close to this channel. Because the men who avoid the trap are usually the men willing to see the truth before their emotions blind them to it. Most men never ask the question directly. They meet a woman who has been single for 5 years, maybe 10, and they assume those years were emotionally neutral. They think she simply waited, quietly, patiently, like nothing inside her changed during all that time. But that is not how human beings work. A woman does not go years without intimacy, touch, desire, emotional closeness, or physical connection without developing survival mechanisms. Some become colder. Some become hyper-independent. Some learn how to separate sex from emotion so completely that vulnerability starts feeling unsafe. And some bury their loneliness so deep beneath work, routines, and distractions that even they stop recognizing it. That is the part nobody talks about. Because the woman you meet today may not be the woman she was before those years alone changed her nervous system, her expectations, and the way she experiences men. And if you do not understand what happened during those silent years, you may completely misunderstand the person standing in front of you. So before we begin, I want you to tell me something in the comments. Have you ever met a woman who had been single for years and felt like something about her emotional world had become harder to reach? Because what most men notice is only the surface. Society has created a very polished story around female singleness. You hear people talk about self-growth, healing journeys, career goals, solo travel, independence. Everyone celebrates the visible parts, but almost nobody talks about the invisible part, the biological part, the emotional part, the part that still exists after the dinner ends, the phone goes silent, and she climbs into an empty bed, night after night. And that silence matters more than people think. A woman does not suddenly stop being human because there is no man in her life. Her body still craves touch. Her nervous system still responds to closeness. Her mind still wants emotional intimacy, validation, affection, desire. Sexuality is not a switch that turns off when circumstances become inconvenient. It simply moves underground. That is why the waiting is never neutral. The longer someone lives without intimacy, the more their system starts adapting to the absence of it. Some women become emotionally restless without understanding why. Others become irritable, numb, anxious, or deeply distracted. Not because they are weak, because human beings were not designed to feel emotionally disconnected forever while pretending everything is perfectly fine. And here is the dangerous part most men miss. When desire has no healthy outlet, people do not just wait. They develop coping patterns, private habits, emotional defenses, entire identities built around surviving the absence. Silence does not erase desire. It only forces people to manage it in private. And once you understand that, you start asking a much more important question. What kind of woman becomes comfortable living that way for years? Not all female singleness comes from the same place. That is the first mistake men make. They see a woman alone for years and assume she simply hasn't found the right guy yet. Sometimes that is true. Many times it is not. Some women become trapped inside a transactional mindset. They stop viewing relationships as connection and start viewing them as evaluation. Every man is tested, measured, compared. He must constantly prove himself worthy of her time, attention, body, or emotional investment. The problem is that when a relationship starts feeling like a permanent audition, emotionally healthy men eventually walk away. Nobody wants to spend years trying to earn warmth from someone who treats affection like leverage. Some women are alone because fear has completely rewired the way they experience intimacy. Betrayal does that. Trauma does that. A painful divorce can do that. The woman who once trusted deeply and got emotionally destroyed rarely returns to the dating world unchanged. Part of her still wants closeness. Another part associates closeness with danger. So she keeps men at arm's length while secretly wondering why connection never fully develops. Then there are women trapped in outdated self-perception. This one is more common than most people realize. A woman remembers the kind of men she attracted at 23, but she struggles to accept that time changes the dating market for everyone. Instead of adapting, she keeps chasing an idealized fantasy that reality no longer supports. So every man feels disappointing because no real man can compete with nostalgia. And to be fair, not every woman alone is emotionally dysfunctional. Some consciously postpone relationships, career pressure, family responsibilities, healing after divorce, health issues. Real life exists. But even strategic singleness still shapes psychology over time. That is the part people avoid admitting, because whether her loneliness came from fear, standards, trauma, or choice, the emotional consequences still accumulate quietly beneath the surface. Some women are alone because they cannot trust men. Others are alone because no man can pass the audition. And eventually, both situations begin changing the way they see themselves. The human nervous system changes when intimacy disappears for long enough. Not immediately, quietly, gradually. That is why many women do not even recognize what is happening to them while it is happening. At first, the absence simply feels inconvenient. Then months pass, then years. Eventually, emotional deprivation stops feeling temporary and starts becoming a lifestyle, and the body keeps score the entire time. Some women become more emotionally reactive. Smaller frustrations hit harder. Patience shortens. Mood swings become more common. Others go in the opposite direction. They become emotionally flat. Harder to excite. Harder to reach. Harder to emotionally move. When the nervous system goes too long without affection, closeness, reassurance, or physical intimacy, it begins adapting to emotional isolation as the new normal. And that adaptation slowly affects self-worth. A woman may never say it out loud, but after years without feeling deeply desired, many begin questioning themselves in private. Am I still attractive? Am I still wanted? Am I becoming invisible? Then social comparison makes it worse. She watches friends get married, build families, receive affection openly, while she quietly learns how to normalize emotional starvation behind a composed face. That is why independence can be misleading. Some women are genuinely peaceful alone, but others are simply highly practiced at surviving loneliness without showing it. Those are not the same thing. The longer someone goes unseen, the harder it becomes to believe they are still worth choosing. And once that emotional emptiness grows large enough, people start searching for ways to regulate it. Not always healthy ways, not always conscious ways, but ways that allow them to function without confronting how disconnected they actually feel. That is where coping strategies begin entering the picture. One of the most common ways some women cope with long-term loneliness is by separating physical intimacy from emotional intimacy. In other words, they stop looking for connection and start looking for regulation. This is where casual arrangements begin. Sometimes it is a friend with benefits, sometimes an emotionally unavailable man, sometimes a married man who cannot offer commitment but can temporarily relieve the feeling of emptiness. The arrangement usually comes with rules: no pressure, no expectations, no vulnerability. Just enough closeness to quiet the body for a little while without risking emotional exposure. And in the beginning, it can feel empowering. A woman tells herself she is in control now. No attachment, no disappointment, no dependence on men emotionally. She gets the attention, the validation, the physical release, then returns to her independent life untouched. At least, that is what she believes. But the nervous system rarely separates sex and emotion as cleanly as people pretend it does. Over time, repeated emotional compartmentalization changes people. A woman who spends years teaching herself not to emotionally attach during intimacy may eventually struggle to emotionally attach even when she finally wants real love. Her body learned how to stay present physically while remaining psychologically guarded. That adaptation does not disappear overnight. And many men completely misread it later. They think she is naturally cold, naturally distant, naturally emotionally unavailable. What they are actually witnessing is survival behavior repeated long enough to become personality. A person who learns to survive without emotional attachment may stop knowing how to attach at all. Now, to be clear, not every casual arrangement destroys emotional health. Human beings are complicated. But the longer someone trains themselves to experience closeness without vulnerability, the more difficult genuine intimacy can become later. And this is where many men get confused, because the woman may look experienced, confident, sexually open even, yet emotionally, she may trust intimacy less than ever before. So let me ask you something. Do you think casual relationships actually heal loneliness? Or do they simply numb it long enough to survive another week? Not every woman turns toward other people when loneliness grows unbearable. Some turn inward instead, completely inward. This is the quieter strategy, the invisible one. The version nobody talks about openly because it feels too private, too uncomfortable, too revealing. But it exists far more than most men realize. Many women learn how to satisfy themselves emotionally and physically without needing another human being involved at all. At first, it feels safer, cleaner, more controlled. No rejection, no emotional confusion, no risk of betrayal. She controls the timing, the fantasy, the distance, the outcome. And control can become addictive when vulnerability has hurt someone badly enough. This is also why fantasy becomes powerful. Not just physical stimulation, but emotional imagination. The mind creates scenarios that reality no longer provides. Desire becomes self-contained, predictable, safe. Over time, some women even start preferring controlled stimulation over real emotional intimacy, because real intimacy requires uncertainty, patience, and emotional exposure. And once someone becomes deeply attached to emotional control, relationships begin feeling emotionally exhausting. That is the hidden danger. Because physical release does not automatically solve emotional isolation. In fact, sometimes it intensifies it. The momentary relief fades, and the silence afterward feels even heavier than before. The body relaxes, but the loneliness remains untouched underneath it. Some people stop needing connection because control feels less painful. That sentence explains more modern relationships than most people are willing to admit. Again, this is not about judging women. It is about understanding adaptation. Human beings always find ways to regulate pain. The real question is whether the coping mechanism slowly teaches someone to avoid the very vulnerability required for genuine closeness later. And for some women, that answer becomes yes. Some women never cope through casual intimacy. Others never retreat into private fantasy. Instead, they redirect the energy completely. This is the woman who becomes obsessed with productivity. She works constantly, builds businesses, trains relentlessly in the gym, overcommits to routines, stays permanently busy. From the outside, she looks disciplined, focused, high value, emotionally strong. And sometimes she genuinely is. But sometimes the constant motion is serving another purpose entirely. Distraction. Because silence forces people to feel things they have spent years avoiding. A woman who never slows down never has to fully confront the ache underneath the movement. So she fills every hour, every weekend, every emotional gap. The body still wants connection, intimacy, closeness, affection. But instead of feeding those needs directly, she converts the emotional energy into achievement, structure, ambition, or self-improvement. And modern culture rewards this adaptation aggressively. People praise her independence, her discipline, her not needing anyone. But very few ask whether the independence is rooted in peace or emotional exhaustion. That distinction matters more than most men understand. Some women do not heal loneliness, they simply outwork it. Others numb themselves differently. Endless streaming, emotional eating, social media validation, attention online, constant stimulation, anything that creates enough dopamine to temporarily overpower emotional emptiness without requiring vulnerability from another human being. And over time, the pattern becomes identity. The woman starts believing she genuinely prefers emotional distance because distance feels familiar now, safe, efficient, manageable. But safety and fulfillment are not the same thing. A person can become incredibly good at surviving emotionally while still feeling profoundly disconnected underneath. And eventually, those survival patterns stop looking temporary. They start becoming permanent parts of personality. That is when the real complications begin. This is the part most men completely misunderstand. They meet a woman after years of singleness and judge her only by her surface behavior. She seems independent, guarded, emotionally difficult to read. Maybe she struggles with closeness. Maybe she pulls away after intimacy. Maybe she craves connection one moment and becomes distant the next. And men often assume that is simply her personality. Many times it is not. It is adaptation. Human beings adjust to whatever environment they survive in long enough. If a woman spends years emotionally protecting herself, eventually the protection stops feeling temporary. It becomes automatic. She no longer consciously decides to keep distance. Her nervous system does it for her. That is why some women struggle to receive genuine affection, even when they desperately want love. They became so used to handling life alone that emotional dependence now feels dangerous. Vulnerability feels unnatural. Needing someone feels weak. So the moment intimacy deepens, panic quietly appears underneath the surface. You see this especially in hyper-independent women. On the outside, they appear powerful, calm, self-sufficient. But many have spent so long surviving emotionally alone that partnership starts feeling like loss of control instead of emotional safety. And the tragedy is this. The very walls that protected her during loneliness may become the same walls preventing closeness later. A woman who trained herself to emotionally detach during casual relationships may struggle to emotionally attach in serious ones. A woman who spent years suppressing desire may struggle reconnecting to intimacy naturally. A woman who survived by avoiding vulnerability may unconsciously sabotage the very relationship she prayed for when she was lonely. The walls people build for protection rarely disappear when love finally arrives. That is why understanding a woman's history matters, not to shame her, not to punish her, but because survival patterns do not magically vanish the moment a relationship begins. And once people become emotionally attached to their defenses, they often create entire belief systems to justify keeping those defenses alive. That is where the conversation becomes even darker. After enough disappointment, some women stop protecting their heart and start protecting their worldview instead. This is where bitterness quietly turns into identity. You hear it in the language. All men cheat. Relationships only drain women. Men are emotionally useless. At first, these statements sound like opinions, but many times they are psychological defense systems disguised as confidence. Because if every man is the problem, then she never has to examine the walls she built herself. Now listen carefully. I am not saying bad men do not exist. They absolutely do. Some women carry legitimate wounds. Betrayal changes people. Emotional abuse changes people. Repeated disappointment can make anyone cynical. But unresolved pain has a dangerous habit of rewriting reality completely. And once someone emotionally invests in that narrative long enough, healing starts feeling threatening. Why? Because healing would require vulnerability again, accountability again, hope again, and hope becomes terrifying after years of emotional survival mode. When pain becomes identity, healing starts feeling like betrayal. That is why some women cling to emotional distance even while claiming they want connection. The defense mechanism became emotionally safer than intimacy itself. And then one day, unexpectedly, a real relationship opportunity appears. A good man enters her life. Someone patient, emotionally available, genuine. But years of adaptation do not suddenly disappear because the right person showed up. In many cases, that is when the deepest internal conflict finally begins. A lot of men assume that once a woman finally meets the right guy, everything naturally falls into place. They think attraction automatically restores intimacy. It does not. Because relationships do not erase conditioning overnight. A woman who spent years emotionally surviving alone often enters a new relationship carrying invisible habits she no longer notices herself. She may crave closeness deeply, then suddenly pull away the moment she receives it. She may want emotional safety but panic when someone finally gets too emotionally close. She may struggle to trust consistency because chaos became more familiar to her than peace. This confuses many men, especially emotionally healthy men. They show up honestly, communicate clearly, stay consistent. Yet the woman still seems emotionally restless, distant, or difficult to fully reach. What he often fails to realize is that he is not meeting the version of her that existed before the loneliness. He is meeting every adaptation those years created inside her. And adaptation leaves fingerprints everywhere, in the way she handles conflict, in the way she receives affection, in the way she responds after intimacy, in how quickly she expects disappointment, in how uncomfortable she feels relying on someone emotionally. Time alone does not automatically create wisdom. Sometimes it only deepens defense mechanisms. Now, to be fair, some women truly grow during singleness. They become more self-aware, more emotionally mature, more honest about what they need. But others simply become better at emotional survival while quietly losing the ability to fully connect. That is why history matters. Not because a woman should be judged for being single, but because patterns built during isolation rarely stay isolated. Eventually, they enter the relationship too. And if a man truly wants to understand the woman in front of him, there is one question more important than all the others. The wrong question is, does she have a past? Every adult has a past. The real question is, what did that past turn her into? That is the question emotionally intelligent men eventually learn to ask. Because two women can experience the exact same loneliness and emerge completely differently. One becomes wiser, softer, more self-aware. The other becomes emotionally armored, cynical, detached, and unable to trust intimacy anymore. The difference is not the pain. The difference is whether the pain was processed or simply survived. That is why you should pay attention to how a woman speaks about her years alone. Does she talk about them with clarity and honesty, or with bitterness and blame? Can she reflect on her patterns? Or does every story end with someone else being responsible for her emotional wounds? Those details matter, because unresolved pain always leaks somewhere, into communication, into trust, into conflict, into intimacy, into emotional availability. And this is where many men make a costly mistake. They become hypnotized by attraction and ignore emotional patterns completely. They focus on chemistry while overlooking psychological readiness for connection. A person's history matters less than the meaning they created from it. Never forget that line. You are not trying to find a woman with no scars. That woman does not exist. You are trying to find a woman who did not allow her loneliness, trauma, or emotional survival mechanisms to permanently disconnect her from intimacy itself. Because some people survive loneliness, and some become emotionally built around it. The uncomfortable truth is that years of loneliness change people. Not just women. People. But today, I wanted you to understand something most men never stop long enough to examine carefully. A woman does not spend years without intimacy, emotional closeness, physical affection, or deep connection without developing strategies to survive the absence. Some of those strategies create growth. Others create emotional distance so deep that even love struggles to cross it later. And if you ignore that reality, you will misunderstand the woman in front of you completely. Because the issue is not whether she has been single. The issue is what those years trained her nervous system to become. Did the loneliness teach her self-awareness, emotional maturity, gratitude for genuine connection? Or did it slowly condition her to avoid vulnerability, suppress intimacy, and emotionally survive without needing anyone at all? That distinction changes everything. I have seen women become stronger through solitude, more grounded, more emotionally honest. But I have also seen women become so adapted to emotional isolation that healthy love started feeling unfamiliar to them. And that is the danger men need to recognize early, instead of discovering it after becoming emotionally attached. You cannot build intimacy with someone who secretly feels safer disconnected. So stop looking only at attraction. Start paying attention to patterns. Watch how she handles closeness. Watch how she speaks about trust, men, relationships, and her past. The truth is usually hidden there long before it appears in the relationship itself. And if this video made you see modern relationships differently, subscribe and share it with another man who needs this perspective. Then tell me in the comments something honestly. Do you think long-term singleness creates wisdom or emotional distance? Because the most dangerous thing about loneliness is not being alone. It is becoming so adapted to survival that you think you know what marriage is? Love, loyalty, forever. But that's not marriage. That's marketing. The reality is far colder, far simpler, and far more powerful. You're not marrying one person. You're marrying every version they'll become. And they're marrying every version of you. The angry one, the tired one, the broken one. Love isn't what saves you. It's what tests you. So before you decide who to spend your life with, you need to understand the truth no one ever told you. What marriage actually demands when the fantasy fades and real life begins. Marriage is the only lifetime contract you sign while your brain is high on chemistry. Think about it. You promise forever during the phase when you're least qualified to make rational decisions. You call it passion, but your brain calls it temporary insanity. That's not your fault. It's biology. You were designed to bond, not to think. But here's what no one tells you. Every love story eventually runs out of chemicals. The high fades, the fantasy quiets, and what's left is what most people never prepared for: reality. The daily friction between two evolving humans who thought love alone would hold everything together. Society romanticized marriage into a fairy tale, not a skill set. They told you to find the one, not to maintain them. So you chase the feeling, not the foundation. And when the feeling disappears, you think something's broken, when in fact it's just beginning. If you're brave enough to hear what marriage actually is, and why most people fail at it, stay. Because the next few minutes will show you what love really demands when the dopamine fades and the work begins. You were never taught the difference between falling in love and building it, because the world sold you a fantasy. That if the chemistry feels right, the future will take care of itself. It won't. Chemistry is a spark. Compatibility is the firewood. Without both, it burns bright, then burns out. Love in its early stage isn't a choice, it's biology. When you meet someone new, your brain floods you with dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. Those chemicals don't want you to think. They want you to attach. That's why she seemed perfect, why every flaw looked charming, why you felt sure you had finally found the one. But that wasn't love. That was nature, making sure you stayed long enough to reproduce. Here's what nobody tells you. That high always fades. The chemical storm that made you feel invincible will eventually run dry. What's left afterward isn't the fantasy, it's the reality. Two human beings, stripped of illusion, trying to make sense of each other's chaos. That's the real beginning of love. But by then, most people panic. They think the feeling disappearing means the love is gone. It isn't. It just means the biology stopped doing the work for you. Men often marry during that fog, that period when their perception is hijacked by chemistry. They think they're choosing a soulmate. In truth, they're choosing a version of her designed by their own dopamine. When reality surfaces, they blame her for changing. But she didn't change. Your perception did. The chemicals left and the truth entered. Love isn't a lightning strike, it's a mirror. It shows you everything you worshipped and everything you ignored. It reveals what you're ready to maintain and what you only wanted to feel. That's why so many relationships collapse right after the honeymoon phase, not because something went wrong, but because the illusion expired. The thrill was a rented illusion. The reality is a lifetime lease. There was a man once who swore he found his soulmate. They were inseparable for the first 3 years. Wild laughter, endless nights, promises that felt eternal. But then, one day, the silence between them got heavier than their words. She didn't betray him. She simply stopped playing the role he imagined. He realized he had never met her. He had only met the version his brain had painted. When that image cracked, so did his devotion. Love doesn't fail you. Illusions do. And the moment you understand that, you stop chasing the feeling and start building the foundation. The hardest truth about marriage isn't that people fall out of love. It's that they evolve. You didn't marry one person. You married every version of that person that life will force them to become. And they did the same with you. At 25, she may have been wild, curious, spontaneous. At 35, she's grounded, cautious, perhaps tired. Her dreams shifted, her energy changed, and her priorities rearranged themselves around a new reality. The same happens to you. Careers evolve, bodies age, ambitions mellow, grief reshapes you. The person who said, "I do," is not the same one standing in your kitchen 10 years later. The problem isn't that people change. It's that they expect not to. They sign a lifelong contract assuming they'll both stay recognizable. But life doesn't care about your vows. It keeps carving, sanding, and rebuilding you. If you resist that, you don't preserve love. You strangle it. The psychology of identity evolution is merciless. Every 7 to 10 years, your internal wiring, beliefs, and emotional patterns subtly shift. You grow or you decay. The mistake many couples make is believing love means sameness. But love isn't a museum. It's a river. It changes shape depending on the season. And if you don't move with it, it leaves you behind. There's a man who once told me, "She isn't the woman I married." And I said, "You're right, she isn't. And you aren't the man she married either." He looked confused, as if change was betrayal. But it wasn't. The betrayal was his refusal to meet her new self. He fell in love with a version of her frozen in time, the 27-year-old who laughed differently, dressed differently, needed him differently. He was trying to love a ghost. This is the silent trap most marriages fall into. The evolution trap. The illusion that real love means never changing, when in truth, real love means never stopping the effort to rediscover. The couples who last are not the ones who stay identical, but the ones who stay curious. They ask, "Who are you now?" and keep falling in love with the answer. When love stops evolving, resentment begins. You start to see your partner as an inconvenience to your comfort instead of a companion in your growth. And slowly, the marriage turns from a living bond into a memory of what it used to be. You cannot love yesterday's version of someone and expect today's version to stay. Because love, like life, demands movement. And when you stop moving, you stop connecting. Marriage isn't about staying the same. It's about learning to meet again. You're not in one marriage, you're in 3. And most people don't realize which one they've stopped maintaining. The first is friendship, the foundation of laughter, ease, and safety. This is where you remember why you liked each other before you loved each other. Friendship is the soft place you fall when life hits hard. It's built from shared jokes, mutual respect, inside stories, and the quiet comfort of being understood without speaking. When friendship fades, you don't become enemies. You become strangers who share a house. You live together, but you no longer see each other. The second is romance. The electricity, the spark, the desire that turns comfort into connection. Romance is not about grand gestures. It's about attention. It's about the look that says, "I still choose you." It's not about the bedroom. It's about the energy between two people who refuse to let routine dull their attraction. When romance dies, the relationship turns into polite companionship. Safe, but lifeless. You become friends without the fire. The third is partnership, the practical structure that keeps your shared life functioning. The finances, the household, the children, the decisions no one wants to make, but both must face. Partnership is about teamwork, about pulling the same direction when life starts to pull you apart. When this part fails, resentment blooms. One partner carries more, the other withdraws, and the silent scoreboard of who does more replaces intimacy. Each of these three relationships demands constant maintenance. Ignore one, and the others collapse under the imbalance. Many couples, especially men, keep the business side running, bills paid, tasks handled, but neglect the friendship and romance. They believe function equals success. But no one wants to be managed. They want to be met. Think about it. You can have great friendship but no romance, and it feels hollow. You can have great romance but no partnership, and it feels unstable. You can have solid partnership but no friendship, and it feels cold. Each version alone is incomplete. Together, they create the ecosystem that sustains love. There was a couple who had been married for 10 years. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The house, the kids, the vacations. But inside, the air was stale. They hadn't laughed in months. Their conversations were logistical, not emotional. They didn't fight. They didn't talk. They weren't married anymore. They were just two project managers sharing a mortgage. The truth is, you don't lose marriage in a moment. You lose it in the small spaces where friendship, romance, and partnership stop intersecting. A strong marriage doesn't exist in perfection. It exists in balance. Because the moment one relationship dies, the others begin to suffocate with it. A strong marriage lives in the space where all three coexist. Most people mistake emotional intensity for emotional stability. They think the rush, the spark, the "I can't stop thinking about you" feeling means destiny. It doesn't. It means dopamine. Chemistry is a feeling. Compatibility is a function. Chemistry makes you excited. Compatibility makes you safe. One makes you fall. The other helps you stay. The confusion between the two is why so many relationships start like fireworks and end like ashes. Chemistry is the short game. It's the reason you can't sleep, can't eat, can't focus. It's thrilling and temporary. Compatibility is the long game. It's how your values align, how your communication patterns fit, how your conflict styles merge or collide. It's the difference between surviving chaos and building peace. You can love someone deeply and still be fundamentally wrong for each other. That's not tragedy. That's psychology. There was a couple once, completely in love. He was driven, restless, always chasing risk. She was grounded, structured, cautious. For a while, their polarity was exciting. He made her feel alive. She made him feel safe. But as years passed, what once felt like balance began to feel like friction. He called her boring. She called him reckless. They didn't fall out of love. They fell out of sync. Compatibility is logic. Chemistry is impulse. One grows through time, the other fades by design. When men choose women based purely on chemistry, they're choosing volatility disguised as passion. It feels intoxicating at first, until it becomes unstable, demanding, exhausting. The same energy that once felt magnetic starts to feel suffocating. Love doesn't collapse because people stop feeling. It collapses because they stop fitting. Shared hobbies mean nothing if your values are at war. Physical attraction can't rescue a relationship where trust, timing, or life goals diverge. You can survive without constant excitement, but you cannot survive without alignment. Compatibility is the architecture of peace. It's what allows you to argue without destroying, to disagree without disrespecting, to plan a future without pretending. Chemistry is the fuel, but compatibility is the map. Without it, passion becomes chaos. Many men chase the high of chemistry like addicts, confusing intensity with depth, mistaking drama for connection. But love built on adrenaline will always require conflict to stay alive. When the calm comes, they call it boredom, not realizing peace was the point all along. Compatibility doesn't feel like a rush. It feels like exhale. It's not obsession, it's clarity. It's the quiet understanding that you're moving the same direction, at the same pace, for the same reasons. The truth is simple. You can survive without chemistry. You can't survive without compatibility, because you don't build a future with feelings, you build it with alignment. Here's a truth most people never learn. Good marriages aren't built on luck. They're built on skill. The people who make it look effortless aren't meant to be. They're emotionally trained. They've learned how to fight fair, speak clearly, and repair fast. They treat love like a discipline, not a feeling. Love doesn't fail because it disappears. It fails because people don't know what to do when it changes form. Every strong marriage stands on 5 psychological skills. Not romance, not timing, not luck. Skills. The first is conflict resolution. Learning to argue without assassinating character. Most people fight to win, not to understand. They weaponize silence, sarcasm, or withdrawal. But in a healthy relationship, the goal isn't victory, it's restoration. You can't build intimacy while trying to dominate. The second is emotional regulation, knowing how to stay grounded when you're triggered. If you can't control your own emotions, your partner becomes your emotional babysitter. And nothing kills attraction faster than dependency disguised as passion. Calm isn't weakness, it's power. The third is communication, saying what you actually need instead of hoping they'll guess. Clarity is respect. Ambiguity breeds resentment. The couples who last don't expect mind reading. They trade assumptions for articulation. The fourth is compromise, the ability to bend without breaking. Not every battle deserves blood. Compromise isn't surrender, it's strategy. It's the art of choosing peace over ego when the outcome matters more than your pride. And finally, accountability. Owning your part in the chaos. Blame is emotional laziness. Accountability is maturity. Every argument has 2 architects. The question is whether you're willing to rebuild instead of retreat. These aren't talents you're born with. They're muscles you train. But most men were never taught emotional fitness. They were taught to work hard, not feel deeply. They can build companies but can't handle confrontation without withdrawal. They can negotiate million-dollar deals but crumble when their partner says, "We need to talk." There was a man who once told me he lost his first marriage because he didn't know how to talk. Not argue, just talk. His wife said she felt alone even when he was in the room. Years later, he learned how to listen, how to pause before reacting, how to validate without agreeing. That's when his second marriage stopped being a war zone. He didn't become more romantic. He became more emotionally literate. Marriage isn't sustained by constant love. It's sustained by consistent skill. You can't feel your way through what requires structure, because love is emotion, but partnership is execution. Happy couples aren't lucky, they're trained. Marriage is not magic, it's emotional management. Most people think marriages end with a single explosion, an affair, a betrayal, a fight too big to recover from. But that's not how it happens. Marriages don't die in one dramatic moment. They die quietly, in the small silences that build between two people who stop trying to reach each other. It's easy to blame the affair, the money, the distance. Those are symptoms, not causes. The real cause is erosion, slow, invisible, silent. It starts with small things. The thank you forget to say, the hug you skip because you're tired, the conversation you avoid because it feels uncomfortable. One day turns into a week into a year, and suddenly you're living next to someone you used to know intimately but no longer understand. Marriages fail when friendship fades into routine, when laughter gets replaced with logistics, when the person you used to share everything with becomes the person you now manage tasks with. It's not the absence of love that kills it, it's the absence of effort. When criticism becomes constant, when tone replaces tenderness, when contempt creeps in unnoticed, respect starts to rot. And once respect goes, love follows. The heart can survive disappointment. It can't survive disdain. There was a man who once told me his marriage ended the day his wife cheated. But when he looked closer, he realized it ended long before that. The affair wasn't the cause. It was the funeral. Years before, he had stopped noticing her. He stopped asking about her day, stopped listening, stopped reaching across the bed. She didn't leave because of another man. She left because he had already left emotionally. He just hadn't moved out yet. That's the truth most people can't face. Love doesn't vanish, it starves. And the starving begins when appreciation ends. When you stop saying thank you, I see you, I'm here. You can't expect a relationship to stay alive if you only feed it during anniversaries and apologies. It's not the big betrayals that destroy love. It's the 1,000 tiny ones, every ignored text, every forgotten compliment, every time you let her fall asleep feeling unseen. People say he changed, or she stopped caring. But often, it's neither. It's exhaustion from carrying an emotional load alone. One partner keeps watering the garden while the other keeps walking past it. Eventually, they stop watering too, not out of anger, but acceptance. Love dies not from fire, but from frost. It doesn't end in shouting, it ends in silence. And by the time most couples realize it, the connection is already gone. Not broken, just withered beyond repair. It's not the affair that kills the marriage. It's the silence before it. Marriage doesn't collapse overnight. It erodes, one neglect at a time. Marriage doesn't fail because love disappears. It fails because people misunderstand what love actually is. You were taught to chase emotion, not endurance. You were raised to find love, not to sustain it. And that's why so many people keep repeating the same pattern, fall fast, fade quietly, blame the other person, and never realize that love was never the problem. Misunderstanding was. Love isn't a feeling you protect, it's a responsibility you choose. It's not measured by how deeply you feel, but by how consistently you show up. Every day, in the small, invisible choices that either build connection or slowly tear it apart. That's what no one told you. You don't fall into lasting love. You build it, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, skill by skill. Marriage was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be practiced, to test who you are under pressure, to mirror your growth, and to force you to evolve or collapse. The couples who make it aren't lucky. They're intentional. They stopped asking, "Am I still in love?" and started asking, "Am I still showing up as the person I promised to be?" So, if this woke something in you, if it made you see your own patterns, your own silence, your own blind spots, don't scroll away. Stay. Subscribe. Because what's coming next isn't about chasing another high. It's about mastering the kind of emotional power that keeps love alive long after the spark dies. Marriage isn't about finding the right person. It's about being the right partner, every single day. The truth about marriage isn't romantic, but it's the only one that works. She says she's fine being single. She laughs about dating apps. She acts like she doesn't care. But behind that calm, she's running tests you don't even see. 5 of them. Each one designed to measure your confidence, your patience, and your ability to lead. Most men fail all 5. Today, you won't. Because I'm breaking down the 5 biggest secrets women use to control attraction and how to turn them to your advantage. That calm confidence you see in her, it's not random. Every glance, every pause, every bit of silence serves a purpose. She's not trying to confuse you, she's trying to protect herself. But what looks like distance is actually a test. A way to see which men can stay centered when she pulls away. And that's where it begins. The first secret women hide, one that flips everything you think you know about attraction. Number 1, she pretends to be hard to get, but only to test a man's confidence. She's not actually hard to get. She just wants to see if you have the confidence to get past the mask. Most men misread that signal. They see the cool posture, the distant look, the unreadable silence, and they assume rejection. But that facade is not rejection. It's protection. It's how a woman filters who's strong enough to approach without needing permission. There's an old study from Florida State University. Average-looking students walked up to strangers on campus and said, "I've noticed you around. You're attractive. Would you go out with me tonight?" More than half of the women said yes, over 50%. No flirting, no story, no background check, just confidence and a direct question. Now think about that. Over half agreed to a date with a man they didn't know. But if you had seen those same women before the approach, their body language would have told you the opposite. Arms crossed, neutral face, earbuds in. They looked like they didn't want to be approached. That's the paradox. It's not that she doesn't want attention. She just doesn't want every man's attention. She wants to feel safe with the one who dares to approach with certainty, not desperation. Her hard-to-get act is a safety mechanism wrapped in social performance. It keeps away the reckless, the impulsive, the men who act before thinking. And that's why the calm, grounded man stands out instantly. When she feels that you are emotionally composed, not chasing validation, not nervous about her reaction, something inside her relaxes. The armor softens. She begins to mirror your steadiness. That's when attraction quietly starts. Women don't open up to men who need proof that she's interested. They open up to men who act as if interest is assumed until proven otherwise. A confident man doesn't wait for permission to engage. He gives permission through his tone, his calm eye contact, and his ease in conversation. Here's the real lesson. Stop looking for the green light. You create it. Every word, every gesture, every pause you control communicates something louder than charm. It communicates certainty. If she appears distant, don't panic. Don't try harder. Don't overcompensate with humor or compliments. Just keep your emotional rhythm steady. Confidence isn't in the approach line. It's in how little her reaction shakes you. Most men crumble when faced with a neutral expression. The few who don't, the ones who can stand in silence without losing composure, are the ones she remembers. Because in her mind, that silence isn't rejection. It's a test. A test of whether you can lead without fear. When you pass it, the energy between you shifts. The woman who seemed cold begins to engage, to smile, to lean in slightly. Her curiosity awakens. What just happened isn't magic. It's psychology. You stayed grounded, and she felt safe enough to be feminine. So next time you think she's hard to get, remember, she's not rejecting you. She's scanning for stability. And if she's not truly hard to get, What about the impossible standards she keeps talking about? Are those real or just another illusion? Number 2. Her ideal standards only exist in her imagination. She says she wants a tall man, a rich man, a man who looks like he stepped out of a magazine. But the man she ends up falling for rarely checks all those boxes. Why? Because what she thinks she wants and what she feels when she's with someone are two completely different things. The fantasy list, height, income, status, success, isn't about love. It's about control. It's her way of convincing herself that she won't get hurt again. When she describes her type, what she's really describing is a shield against disappointment. But love doesn't care about lists. It cares about emotion, timing, and chemistry. You can see this contrast most clearly in the digital world. On dating apps, women swim in abundance. Thousands of profiles, endless matches, filters, swipes, categories. On paper, they have total power. And yet, most of them never go on a single date from those apps. Why? Because text-based perfection doesn't create the feeling they're looking for. The app feeds the fantasy, but starves the emotion. In real life, things flip. The rules collapse. A woman might ignore a dozen men online who look perfect, but the guy who walks up to her in person, calm, playful, confident, sparks something she can't explain. He doesn't fit the fantasy, but he fits the feeling. And feelings always win. That's the hidden truth. Women fall for how they feel around a man, not what he looks like on paper. A woman may fantasize about the CEO, the athlete, the millionaire, but in reality, she often chooses the man who makes her feel seen, safe, and feminine. Because deep down, she doesn't want to compete with him. She wants to relax with him. Many beautiful women quietly prefer normal men. Not weak, not insecure, but emotionally grounded, approachable, consistent. The kind of man who doesn't make her question if he'll still be there tomorrow. The fantasy man might make her heart race. The real man makes her nervous system rest. That doesn't mean you should lower yourself or aim small. It means you should stop performing for her checklist. Stop trying to fit into her ideal. The truth is, she doesn't even live by it herself. Most of those standards dissolve the moment she feels that spark, the mix of tension, trust, and comfort that logic can't measure. Here's how to use that knowledge. Don't sell yourself. Reveal yourself. Don't try to prove you're enough. Act as though you already are. Let your presence speak louder than your resume. When you do that, something powerful happens. The fantasy list fades. Her guard drops. She stops comparing you to imaginary men and starts reacting to the real one standing in front of her. And once she begins to seek your approval, when she wants to be chosen by you, everything changes. Because the moment she feels the need to earn your acceptance, the power dynamic flips. And that brings us to the next secret, the one most men never recognize. Women are drawn to the man who makes them work for his validation. Number 3. Women are drawn to men who make them work for acceptance. Here's the paradox no one tells you. The harder you try to impress her, the faster she loses interest. Attraction isn't built by effort. It's built by leverage. Most men enter interactions trying to win a woman's approval, saying the right things, offering validation, playing it safe. They forget one simple truth. When you chase approval, you silently declare that she has the power. And the moment you do that, she stops feeling attraction and starts feeling superiority. Reversal is everything. The real shift happens when you subtly change positions, when you become the one who decides whether she's worth your attention. This doesn't mean arrogance. It means calm certainty. You already know your value. so you don't audition for hers. Here's what happens psychologically. When a man's behavior signals that he's not dependent on her validation, a woman's mind triggers curiosity and mild anxiety, the two key ingredients of attraction. She starts wondering, why isn't he chasing me like the others? That question alone fuels the spark. Women are wired for challenge, not games, not cruelty, challenge. They want to feel they've earned emotional access to a man who doesn't give it to everyone. When you make her feel she needs to earn your acceptance by showing her warmth, effort, kindness, she becomes invested. You've probably seen this dynamic play out in subtle ways. Think of the guy who isn't rude, but doesn't overreact to her teasing. He smiles, holds eye contact, changes the subject when she tests him. He's unshakable. That emotional stability communicates quiet dominance, and that, for many women, is magnetic. When you hold your frame like that, something shifts inside her. The conversation stops being about whether you are good enough for her and starts being about whether she is good enough for you. That mental switch changes everything. Suddenly, she's the one watching your reactions, gauging your interest, trying to earn your attention. That's not manipulation. That's balance. Because when she's trying to impress you, she's actually investing in you. And whatever people invest in, they value more deeply. But here's where most men ruin it. They take this power dynamic too far. They confuse confidence with coldness. They turn self-respect into ego. That's not the point. The goal isn't to punish her or play control games. The goal is to stand tall enough that she feels safe lowering her guard. A woman respects a man who treats her well but still has standards. She feels secure when you value her without abandoning your boundaries. That's what makes the connection equal. Not submission, but strength. So the next time you catch yourself over-explaining, over-texting, or overcompensating, stop. Breathe. Ask yourself, am I trying to earn her, or am I letting her earn me? Because when a woman feels she must win your acceptance, attraction deepens into desire. And once that happens, the next secret reveals itself. One most men are too afraid to believe. Women love sex far more than they admit. 4. They love sex, but must hide it to be respected. Let's make one thing clear. Women love sex. They think about it, crave it, and enjoy it just as deeply as men do. But here's the difference. Society gives men permission to express desire. Women have to disguise it behind composure, mystery, and restraint. It's not because they're dishonest. It's because they've learned that the cost of being open about desire is reputation. The same act that earns a man admiration earns a woman judgment. A man can brag about his experience and be labeled confident. A woman does the same and risks being called reckless or cheap. So she adapts. She hides what's natural to protect what's valuable, respect. This is the silent paradox every woman carries. She wants to be desired, but she also wants to be trusted. She wants passion, but she fears being reduced to it. So she performs a delicate dance, enough warmth to attract, enough restraint to seem virtuous. You'll see this play out in bars, on dates, even in long relationships. She'll pull you close, then pull away. Not to manipulate, but to measure. She's reading how you react to her restraint. When you chase too hard, she questions your depth. When you stay composed, she feels safe, exploring that side of herself with you. Because your calm says, I'm not here to use you. That's what opens the door to real intimacy. The truth most men miss is that women don't suppress sexuality out of weakness. They do it out of strategy. Their social world demands it. Every woman has seen another woman punished for being too open. So they learn to filter. They want to connect physically, but only with someone who makes that connection feel emotionally safe, not transactional. This is why your energy matters more than your words. A man who radiates grounded confidence doesn't need to push for anything. He lets tension build naturally. His presence tells her it's okay to let go, not because he convinced her, but because he proved she's safe doing so. You'll know when that switch flips. Her tone softens. Her laughter lingers a little longer. Her gaze stays locked a little too long. She's letting her guard down, testing if you'll still treat her the same when she shows her desire. If you meet that moment with calm, not arrogance, not excitement, just steady control, she'll trust you in a way no words can buy. And that's the real secret. Attraction isn't about chasing lust. It's about earning the right for her to reveal it. Once she believes she can trust her desire around you, she stops pretending and starts connecting. So never assume her silence means disinterest. It's often self-preservation. Underneath that restraint, her curiosity burns quietly, waiting for the man patient enough to make her feel safe expressing it. But if you think she's perfectly content living behind that mask of control, you're mistaken. Because beneath that confidence, another truth hides, one she'll never admit out loud. Her independence often covers a deep, unspoken loneliness. Number 5. She acts happy being single, but carries a quiet loneliness inside. Scroll through her feed and you'll see it. The perfect brunch photo, the solo vacation, the confident smile framed by sunlight. Everything screams, I'm fine on my own. But late at night, when no one's watching, the silence speaks louder. The playlist changes, the mask drops, independence fades into longing. That's not hypocrisy, it's survival. Modern women are trained to wear confidence like armor. I don't need a man isn't always pride, it's protection. It keeps them from being seen as weak, needy, or incomplete. In a world that rewards independence but mocks vulnerability, pretending to be content becomes a form of emotional self-defense. But here's the truth she won't admit. Even the strongest women crave connection. Not dependence, connection. They want to be understood without explaining, desired without judgment, loved without losing themselves. When that doesn't happen, they build walls, post smiles, and call it empowerment. That's why so many men misread the signs. They see her cool detachment and think she's untouchable. They assume she's uninterested, unavailable, too focused on her own world. What they don't realize is that her calm isn't rejection. It's exhaustion. She's tired of opening up to men who mistake honesty for weakness. The real insight here is this. Loneliness doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like control. When a woman says, I'm good, she's often saying, I can't afford to fall for someone who doesn't get me. Her solitude is safer than vulnerability. Until she meets a man whose presence doesn't threaten her independence, but gives it space to breathe. Ooh, that's where your strength becomes her peace. You don't break through her walls by force. You make them irrelevant. You stay steady when she tests your distance. You stay calm when she withdraws. And you listen when she finally lets something slip. A story, a sigh, a subtle crack in the facade. That's when trust begins. Because when a woman feels seen in her loneliness, she stops fighting it. She starts letting you in, not because you pushed, but because you understood. And in that understanding, something sacred happens. She can finally be soft again. So if you ever meet a woman who insists she's happy alone, don't challenge her words. Don't argue with her independence. Simply mirror her strength with calm awareness. Talk less, notice more. The goal isn't to rescue her. It's to remind her she doesn't have to defend herself with you. And once you do, the connection deepens into something neither of you can fake. You stop playing roles. She stops performing strength. It's two people meeting without masks. And that's where real attraction lives. Once you understand that, you realize the entire game changes. Knowing her secrets isn't enough. You have to know how to use them to create balance, control, and peace in every interaction. That's what the final secret is about. How men turn understanding into advantage, not to manipulate, but to lead. Understanding women isn't about outsmarting them. It's about reclaiming balance in a world where most men gave their power away without realizing it. When you finally see through the performance, the hard to get, the fantasy lists, the power tests, the hidden desire, and the silent loneliness, you stop reacting and start leading. That's what mastery looks like. Calm, composed, aware. You don't need to play games, manipulate, or memorize lines. You just need to understand how these 5 truths work together, because they're all part of the same emotional pattern. Women hide complexity behind control, and men lose control by trying to decode complexity. The moment you step out of that loop, everything changes. Here's what that looks like in practice. When she acts cold, you don't chase. You hold your ground. When she boasts about her standards, you don't debate. You create emotional contrast she can feel. When she tests your limits, you don't flinch. You smile because you expected it. When she hides her desire, you don't push. You build trust until she reveals it herself. When she plays the strong, independent role, you don't compete with it. You respect it, then show her she can relax beside you. This is how quiet strength works. You move through every interaction with a calm certainty that says, I understand what's happening, and I don't need to prove myself. That steadiness is magnetic. It's the emotional currency women value most but rarely find. A man who knows his worth yet never needs to announce it. The reason this approach works isn't mystical, it's psychological. A woman mirrors the emotional energy of the man she's drawn to. If you lead with anxiety, she responds with distance. Lead with balance, and she responds with warmth. It's not dominance, it's calibration. Control, in this sense, isn't about power over her, it's about power over yourself. You can't stop her from testing, hiding, or performing. Those instincts are wired. But you can decide how you respond. And that's where real influence begins. Because the man who stays composed, no matter how she behaves, becomes the anchor she didn't know she needed. And when you master this, something remarkable happens. Conversations feel effortless. Tension builds naturally. She starts to open up, not because you demanded it, but because your energy made it safe. That's emotional leadership. And it's what separates men who struggle from men who attract. Remember this: confidence isn't arrogance, and control isn't manipulation. True control is emotional clarity, knowing what's real, what's fear, and what's just performance. Once you see that clearly, you'll never be thrown off by mixed signals again. Because the truth is, women don't want a perfect man. They want a centered one. The kind of man who doesn't run from their storms. He stands still until the storm passes. And that's what understanding these 5 secrets really gives you. Not tricks, not tactics, but peace. The quiet power of knowing who you are, what you want, and what you no longer need to chase. Women aren't complicated. They just appear that way to men who don't understand the emotional language they speak. Every silence, every test, every contradiction has meaning. And once you can read it, the confusion fades. You stop guessing what she wants and start seeing who she really is. Think about how many times you've doubted yourself because of mixed signals. The text left on read. The cold look that followed a warm smile. The moments you wondered, did I do something wrong? No, you didn't. You just didn't understand the system she was running. Every woman you meet carries 2 selves, the public mask and the private truth. The mask protects her. The truth connects her. And the man who can navigate between the two calmly, respectfully, without losing himself, becomes unforgettable. Understanding these 5 secrets doesn't turn you into a player. It turns you into a leader, someone who can meet women without fear or confusion. You see the game, but you don't play it. You create your own frame. That's where confidence lives, not in the script you say, but in the steadiness you hold. If you've ever felt lost, silent, or uncertain around women, remember this. She isn't testing your words. She's testing your composure. She's trying to find out if you're built from strength or from approval. And when you show her that you can handle her storms without losing your center, that's when she finally lets you in. So here's your moment to take control, not of her, but of yourself. To stop overthinking every message, every pause, every glance. To stop chasing validation and start building presence. And if this message struck something inside you, if you finally understand what you've been missing, then don't just nod and scroll away. Do something about it. Leave a comment below. Which secret changed how you see women the most? Subscribe now, so you never forget the principles that keep your emotions grounded and your confidence unshakable. Share this video with another man who needs to hear it. Because when a man truly understands women, he no longer needs to chase them. He simply attracts them. That's not magic.